welcome guests. We're going to do it a little bit differently tonight. I generally have the open part of the meeting for the community to respond at the very beginning. Then we do our meeting, and there's no response after that. I'm going to open it up because you're all here, and we're going to change that, and I have the ability to do that. So that's what we're going to do. I'd like to bring, actually, I'd like to do the minutes first.
Okay. We need a motion on the floor for the minutes approval of the meeting October 17th, 2019.
I move that we approve the minutes for the meeting of October 17th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All set? Okay. The finance director is going to give the new members a little education in the financing of the CPC. Would you please identify yourself?
Good evening. My name is Carol Capola. I'm the finance director here for the town of Harwich. I have prepared a document for your review this evening, and I would be more than happy to go over that document with you. It starts with what the ending balances were. We have four different buckets for CPC money. One is historic, one is open space, and one is for community housing or affordable housing. The last is an undesignated bucket, as we call them, and that's essentially for recreation purposes. So the document begins with what was the ending balance in each one of those buckets at the end of the fiscal year of 19, which ended June 30th of 19. And then we move forward to what's happening in fiscal year 20. So there were decisions that were made at town meeting of 19. There were decisions to fund particular projects at town meeting, and those have all been taken to, those dollar amounts have all been taken into account here. It's as if, for this purpose, that you've completely expended all those funds for all the articles that were approved. So with saying that, we begin with the balances that were remaining as of the end of June. We're adding in revenue that has been received through 10/31 of 2019. We're taking into account the debt service that was in FY21. And then the committee has returned some funds. So they made appropriations, they brought it to town meeting. Town meeting authorized those articles for particular projects. If the funds were not spent or not completely spent, the CPC has rescinded those funds, and so those are listed here. The first one is a historical property inventory, which was town meeting of 16, and that's $20,000. There's another one here for Brooks Library, and that's just over $38,000, and a small amount to preserve documents, and then another item for Brooks Library, for the painting of Brooks Library. So when the committee meets to make decisions on the minutes are prepared, and once the minutes are voted on, I get a copy of them, and that's when I make these transactions. I typically don't make them until I have an approved version of the minutes, the meeting. So finally, about the middle of the page, you'll see a balance for FY20 here for each one of these buckets. However, the Commonwealth has some pretty strict guidelines with when you can spend that FY20 funds. And you are not allowed to spend them certified by the Department of Revenue. The FY20, so fiscal year 20, the year we're in right now, it ends fiscal year ends June 30th of 2020. Those funds are typically certified sometime around August or September 2020. So you won't be able to spend the money that's coming in this year. What you can do, though, is, as odd as you may think this is, but what you can do is spend the estimated revenue for FY '21. So I've provided that information to you here. I've looked at Proposition 2.5. What are we raising this year in taxes, the 3% surcharge, to support CPA funds? Add 2.5%, because that's what is allowed for under Proposition 2.5. We estimated the state revenue. Your state revenue has increased, or is estimated to be increased for FY '21. And at the end of the day, the last line item on this piece of paper you have in front of you that says the estimated FY '21 balance. So the first column is your undesignated balance, which would be your recreation. The second is open space. The third is historic preservation, and the fourth is affordable housing or community housing. There's a total estimated amount of FY '21 CPC funds of just over $3 million. And so at this point, those buckets are not going to change unless the state comes up with additional revenues, or there's more information that comes from the state level. We don't anticipate those buckets to change at all for your decision-making purposes as you consider all of the applications before you. So it's a lot of information that I provided. I'm happy to review it with any of you in person, one-on-one, or take any questions that you may have.
Carol, would you clarify the money that gets rescinded goes back into the individual categories?
That is correct. So we go back to the original article that was written at town meeting warrant, and we verify that information as to what we call them bucket that they were appropriated from. So if they were appropriated from historic preservation and there's $20,000 remaining, that $20,000 goes back to historic preservation. It would never go to undesignated.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board? Donna?
Thank you, Carol. Can you tell me when the land bank debt service will be fully paid off?
2024.
And just for public purposes, I think it's important that people understand that you can't use a bucket such as historic for open space or another category. So when you say that there's $3 million available, there isn't really $3 million available. So.
Well, you have, I'm not going to speak for the finance director. Go ahead.
So the state has actually provided tremendous amount of guidelines with regard to how CPA funds can be spent. So it's not that you don't have $3 million. It's just that you have $3 million in total. Some of it must be set. You may have $300,000 being segregated as historic. Those funds can't be used to install lighting at one of the fields that they play baseball at, because that's not considered a historic purpose.
All right, and also, if historic comes up with an amount of money, whatever that amount is, and the bucket is exceeded by the application, provided there's money in the undesignated fund, historic has the ability, or this board has the ability, to transfer that money.
That's correct.
To make up whatever it exists in the application. Any more questions?
Nope.
From the newer members of the board? Any questions? Nothing here. Good. Okay, Carol, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, moving on. Under new business, the website, what could be added? Any quick ideas so far?
Can I just say
John.
that I made the changes to the best of my ability that we discussed at the last meeting, and I hope they've been reviewed by the other members of the board to make sure I did what we discussed at the last meeting.
Okay. Mary?
John, I thought it was great. The one question I had, I went looking for our email address for David, and I didn't see our email address on there.
Oh, okay, so,
And maybe it was just me, not
no, it probably wasn't.
not seeing it, but
Probably me, yes.
It's the town at
it's the CPC at.
Town, Harwich, please.
And I just didn't, I went looking for it and
Yeah,
didn't
no,
see
you're
it,
right.
so.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions about the website? Don, go ahead.
Just because the applications are on the website, if the public wanted to see someone's application, is there somewhere they go in the Harwich Town Hall to view them?
Yeah, well, we do give the library copies of the applications, all the applications.
Okay.
Library has copies. Anita has it at the clerk's office, and the selectmen have a copy through the town administrator.
Okay,
So that's available.
all right.
Anything else?
No.
Joe?
On the, didn't you list all the dates coming up for the meetings?
I did.
I thought I missed one on the, I saw 3 there, but I thought there were 4. The 21st or the 14th. Did you have all,
3 meetings, right?
You're right.
I think they were there.
were they all there?
I
Okay.
thought so.
You may be thinking regular December meeting.
I am.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll start with the town administrator. I couldn't see you back there.
Harry's hiding.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I'll sit up here.
That's fine.
I do have some materials to pass out. Actually, if I can indulge, if you take one and pass it.
Yeah.
No.
Oh,
It's covered.
Good evening. As many people know, I'm Christopher Clark, Town Administrator here in the community.
Mr. Administrator, would you just give a quick overview of what happened last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting with the process?
That's exactly where I was going to start off.
I'm sorry.
pass those down.
You got to give a guy a break. So the original application that was submitted, well, let me back up a little bit. You know, I was going through the application before I came down, and, you know, I think one thing that's very appropriate is that this is a community playground. And I was very impressed by the amount of different groups that came together to form a community to put this application together, as well as the number of children who submitted letters of support. One of the things, and I just want to kind of single out Mary, I always butcher her last name, Mary Oldrich. Oldak, thank you. I think she did an outstanding job bringing people together and working in a collaborative manner. With that being said, as the chair had indicated, that there was I would call it more of a little bit of a defect, that the submission originally had on there the PTO. The property is actually technically owned by the town of Harwich and is leased by the Monomoy Regional School District. We do have, when I say we, the Board of Selectmen and the Monomoy Regional School District have an IMA, an intermunicipal agreement, on how the property would be utilized in the back of the facility. And in that, it calls for a joint ownership or mutual ownership when it comes to any changes that are going to be made. So I do have, what I passed out was a revised application that has the Town of Harwich Board of Selectmen as the primary applicant, and then Monomoy Regional School District as the co-applicant. So that element of technical correction, I think, has been accomplished. Monomoy Regional School District yesterday voted to do that, and the Board of Selectmen voted last night to approve that. I was also asked to answer a couple of questions, so I did get email from Attorney Giorgio answering some of the questions, and I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with a few more, but at least the three that I had acknowledged from last night was that the ones he went through, one of the elements of the application was in terms of the who should the applicant be. So he points out that the applicant should be, as I just stated, the IMA, that should be the town in Monomoy, so that is, he's in agreement with that element. There was some question in terms of the restriction on use because of children using it, that it may not be open to the public. Attorney Giorgio, I think, very well highlights that the children that go there are kids from Harwich. So it is being used by Harwich residents when they're in school, and that he did not see that as any significant flaw to have it be open and restricted during school hours and then open to the general public after such school hours. And that is consistent with the IMA as well. I know last night there was a little bit of procurement process questions. He said it is under the procurement law that this would have to be constructed. It's 3039M is the statutory reference. It does not, I actually had the number wrong in my mind, but 1.5 million is the threshold for having an owner's project manager. The request before you this evening is 641,000, well below that threshold. He did believe that it would be legally prudent to have a licensed construction supervisor oversee the construction of the facility. So what I had indicated last night, that we will allocate a town staff to do that. We have Sean Libby is the facility maintenance director, and he has a construction supervisor's license and is very adept at working closely with groups to help construct what the community from Monomoy had put together as the vision for not just the Monomoy community, but all the community put together for what the vision of this park would mean for all the children of Harwich. So I think that we have those answers that I was asked to obtain last night. For the details, because so much work has gone into it by the PTO, I would like to turn it over to Justin Tavano, who's joining me this evening, to walk through with the committee what it entails and the vision of the project.
Justin.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, committee. Thank you for your service on this committee. Thank you for hearing us tonight and for your consideration of this project moving forward. I'm Justin Tavano. I'm representing the Harwich Community Playground Committee. I know our presentation time is brief, so I'm going to just rattle through a couple quick points I want to make.
You've got some extended time.
Okay. There are kind of 5 focus areas that I just really wanted to kind of hone in on the project and why I think it's applicable to the community preservation funds. Those areas are the applicability, the urgency of the project, the cost of the project, the affordability and cost comparisons throughout the Commonwealth, and the multiple funding sources. Some of this information I'm sure you've already seen in our application. In the applicability, on page 1 of our application, we stated the Harwich Community Playground Project is an outdoor, land-based recreational project to create, rehabilitate, and replace, quote, playground equipment and other capital improvements to the land or the facilities thereon to make them more functional for their intended recreational use. Coalition website, it's stated as one of their goals, one of the CPA goals should be improving a community's character and quality of life. And as a committee, what the design of this playground and everything that it encompasses really does focus on that goal of improving the community's character and the quality of life of the people who would be using it. And finally, in regards to the applicability, this is, again, as Mr. Clark pointed out, it's not simply just a school playground. This is a community project. This is a playground. It's used possibly more outside of school hours than it is during school hours. Castle in the Clouds has always been a heavily trafficked area, heavily used playground on the weekends, evenings, throughout the summer and throughout the school vacation weeks. So we do think that it's not building a playground for the school, it's building a park for the community. In regards to the urgency, just a little bit of background on that. When Mary Oldak took over as principal in 2018, she conducted a safety audit of the playground. You've seen some of that information, I'm sure, in our packet. In 2018, there were some immediate safety and health issues that were the things that were most immediate were either repaired, replaced, or removed. And part of that audit, started to identify that the playground was in decline. Over the course of the past year, following that safety audit, Mary brought kind of some stakeholders together and some interested people from the PTO, from the school council, and from other organizations throughout the community, and developed a committee. The committee set out to look at what the best plan was moving forward, rehabilitating the playground or looking into replacement. A quote was received from the original builder of Castle in the Clouds, Leathers Associates, which indicated it would cost roughly $150,000 to put a 2 to 3 year Band-Aid on the playground, at which point the playground would still need to be replaced. So we saw that, and that just didn't seem like a cost-effective direction to go. At that point, it became pretty evident that replacement was going to be necessary. From there, the playground committee said, well, how do we move forward? We need some plans. A design firm was hired, in good faith, paid for by the school district to help us kind of move the project forward, since we were a committee with no money. So we hired a design firm. We started doing some needs assessments and figuring out what would be required at the playground, but also what would be desired at the playground. Because as you looked at some of the things from the safety audit, probably one of the biggest highlights was not just a playground in decline, but a playground that was completely non-compliant with ADA and MAAB, which is the Massachusetts Architectural Accessibility Board, Access Board. It's a lot of letters, sorry. So it was completely non-compliant with those regulations. So replacement seemed like it was the direction that we needed to go in. As we started to sit with the design firm and develop some needs and come up with plans for the playground, we put together what we thought was a really good comprehensive plan for a playground that was 100% inclusive of all of the entire student population and any visitors to the town of Harwich. And not just for the people using the playground, but for caregivers that might be bringing their children or grandchildren there. We really wanted to focus on the accessibility aspect of the playground. Throughout the past year, the playground continued to decline pretty rapidly. Ultimately, a review of the safety audit that was conducted in 2018, the same auditor came out and did a review about a month ago and was herself surprised at the amount of decline that happened in the course of the past year. Additionally, worsening trends and data from the school nurse's office in regards to injuries and splinters. And again, the lack of ADA and MAAB accessibility compliance started to accelerate the process, and the school committee had a vote on October 24th to immediately close the playground, which was followed by a Board of Selectmen vote on the 28th to demolish the playground. Currently, so those things kind of, now the school's without a playground, the community's without a valuable asset to the community, and so I think that speaks to the urgency of the project. When we first sat down as a committee, I don't think that any of us thought a year later we would be looking at the back side of the school without a playground sitting there. In the meantime, the teachers are creatively engaging the students in outdoor recess activities to keep them moving, to keep them acting creatively, and to hopefully keep the teachers sane. But it's not a suitable long-term solution. An elementary school needs a playground. community need. Moving on to the cost of the project, there's some significant cost drivers when you start looking at these playground projects that the more involved we became in the project, the more eye-opening it was. As you start looking at things like regulations and compliance issues, the cost starts to increase pretty rapidly. One of the most significant cost components of the project is the poured-in-place rubber surfacing, which 100% meets the ADA and MAAB compliance. And it's a significant portion of the cost of the project that we've applied for. Our goal is to have a playground that is completely inclusive and accessible for everybody that might visit there. The cost of the project that we've applied for is in line with a number of other projects throughout the Commonwealth over the course of the past 5 years that have been partially or fully CPA funded. This playground is a very large playground. The elementary school is a large elementary school comparatively to many other elementary schools. There's 550 students roughly there between kindergarten and 4th grade. And there's also a preschool. Preschool needs to have its own separate playground, which falls under its own sets of codes. The preschool playgrounds need to be fenced in. They need to have code compliance. That's another thing that drives the cost up pretty significantly. The goal of our plan was to have the preschool integrated into the main playground, not only making that easier for teachers who are assigned to monitor the playground to keep an eye on everything at once, but also to make those younger children feel like they're really part of the community. Outside of school hours, it also allows caregivers who have children of multiple ages to have their children all playing in the same area, as opposed to a separation of a couple hundred yards away from each other, making it difficult for them to keep an eye on their children. Another cost driver of this project was a shift in the playground footprint. The Castle on the Clouds playground sat fairly close to the school, for those of you who aren't familiar with what that playground looked like. There was no emergency vehicle access to the perimeter of the school. So in the process of doing this, if we were looking at replacement, we wanted to make sure that the playground itself was shifted back to allow access there. In regards to the affordability, and this goes hand in hand with the cost, comparatively, we think that the playground is right in line with other playgrounds that have been built. Chatham Elementary School is just beginning their project. It's a $325,000 playground for 220 students. So it's less than half the number of students at about half the price. They have $295,000 in CPC funds for their project. So it's almost, and the remainder of it was fundraised. Eddy Elementary School in Brewster completed a playground project in 2014, which cost roughly $250,000, and that school services 244 students, and about $200,000 that was funded by CPA funds. Going back to 2012, the Orleans Elementary School built a playground, similar probably in size and scope to what we're looking to do. And the cost of that playground was approximately $600,000, and that was 7 years ago. And the original Castle on the Clouds playground, although it was fundraised and community built, had a value in 1994 of $250,000. For the multiple sources of funding, the Playground Committee has established a fundraising committee, which is in the process of forming and getting the appropriate tax identifications that it needs to move forward. They're reviewing a list of potential fundraisers. They're reaching out to local contractors for contributions of time, materials, and labor where it's deemed appropriate. Additionally, the PTO last year conducted a fundraiser, which brought in $33,500, which has been donated to the playground effort. And the PTO has also pledged funds from that fund run again this year to the playground.
Chris, anything to add?
No, I think you did a nice job, so. We're here for questions, and we'll stay in our seats,
Okay.
if that's okay?
I'm going to open it up to the board. Dawn?
So you already started demolition, and on the costing base, you were carrying $60,000 for miscellaneous site work, mobilization, erosion control, and demo. Do you know how much of that was demolition?
I think it's roughly $20,000.
Okay. And that's being done by the
that-
Harwich DPW?
That's been completed by the Harwich DPW.
Okay.
Yeah, and just on that, Harwich DPW obviously took that down. We are totaling up the cost for the machine rental and the actual disposal, and the school department, or the Monomoy Regional School District has committed $20,000 to pay for that. So that element could be theoretically removed from the request.
So they're gonna pay for it out of an existing appropriation
Out of-
that they
Out
have?
of the
school
school
funds.
stabilization.
Okay. Did you at all, you said you would consider other grants. Did you at all look at, the state has an accessibility grant that they do on an annual basis? Was that looked at all?
I know that I haven't been the one doing the grant research. Joy Jordan has done a significant amount of that. I know that there's 5 to 10 probably grants that she's looked into. I'm not sure if that's one of them specifically.
Okay. The outdoor classroom total, is that something that could be phased at a later date?
As far as phasing the playground, it is something that we wrestled with. When we looked at what we came up with for a design, it didn't seem as though there was much that really to phasing. We tried to look at it creatively and see where we might be able to get away with kind of coming back to this and doing certain aspects later. I think if there was one thing that could potentially be phased, it would probably be the outdoor classroom.
Okay.
As far as the rest of the project, we really firmly believe as a committee that the playground itself, the playground and the preschool playground needs to kind of be one contiguous effort to be done at the same time.
Okay. So the outdoor classroom is $35,000. Okay. Okay. Those are all the questions I have right now.
Thank you. Kim?
I also had questions about the funding sources, so thank you for answering that. And you answered some of my other questions already. The one I have left, has a timeline been changed or moved up since these new developments of Castle in the Clouds being demolished after the application?
No, because we already had the application in here for October 1st. So you guys can,
Well, as Carol kind of alluded to, we're kind of restricted by what we can do by state law, so the funding won't be available until July 1 anyway.
So
So
no
I
other
think this
grant
is-
opportunities that you have no anticipated idea of any other grant money coming in?
nothing concrete at this point. I mean, there are things that we are applying for, or plan on applying for. What's some of the grants is, if anybody's familiar with some of the grants that are out there, is a lot of it sometimes has to do based on what the municipality can afford and can't afford, and a lot of times some of these playground grants, some more low-income areas, but we are continuing to look for certain things, and not necessarily big grants. We're looking at small grants too, different ways that we can chip away at it.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Anything else, Kim?
That's it. Thank you.
John?
Okay, first, I'd like to congratulate you for this amazingly thorough proposal. I think it's kind of an outlier compared to other things we've seen. And you guys obviously have spent a lot of time and energy putting that together. So I have one very sort of specific question, which is, in the proposal, you cite Safe Routes to School grant, but I didn't get the relevance of that to anything else. I mean, and you also gave the budget for that, but how does that bear on this proposal?
I think it's indirect, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I think it is important to have addressed kind of publicly. I think it's not a direct, there's no direct correlation to this, to CPA funds or to CPC. But what I think the intention there was to show that Principal Oldak has really committed herself to creating a safe environment for the children. And that Safe Routes to School grant is $1 million grant to improve safety and accessibility in the neighborhood leading to the school. And that's $1 million that she acquired, that's going to the town.
And just on that project, just to elaborate a little bit, the concept behind it is obviously, as the name implies, safe routes to schools. So it's designed to kind of improve the roadway network, or specifically the sidewalk network around the school. So if people wanted to walk to the school, not just during school hours, but during off hours, that then becomes a more walkable location. Making sure that when people are handicapped, it's nice to have a handicap facility, but if you can't get there too easily, it's not as valuable. So, and Mary did do a very nice job working with the town to get that grant. So we are in the queue, we have that grant, and we're working on executing that grant to improve the sidewalk network around the school that would draw people in. One thing on the earlier question about, we did submit also a secondary grant, which we did not get, for improved sidewalks up in the downtown area here in Harwich Center. So we did apply through our, they call themselves HARC, the Accessibility Committee, and we were not successful in that. But I think it's relevant that the state recognizes the need is there and is contributing funds to the Safe Routes for Schools. So they recognize the value of the school as a regional resource.
Anything else, John?
Yeah, so I wanted to follow up on the questions of other funding sources. Do you have fundraising goals that would be useful input to us? I mean, you're looking for grants here and there, I understand, but what is your objective there? How much money do you expect to raise, or how much money, have you set yourself some kind of a goal to raise money against this project?
So the fundraising committee was just formally put together last week. So as far as a specific dollar amount of a goal, I don't think that's been established yet.
Is that on your agenda, or the fundraising committee's agenda?
Certainly on our agenda, and it's probably something that we will have locked down as a goal by the end of the week. Said I think this the whole process has really kind of accelerated on everybody. But you know, I think it's fair to say, at a minimum, the PTO fund run brought in the $33,500 last year. We expect it to bring in at least equal to that again this year. We're hopeful that it'll bring in more, because now the school sits without a playground. So we're fully expecting people to contribute more than they did last year. So I would say, you know, at a minimum expectation, we would be looking at another $35,000 from the PTO.
I see. So just finally, Donna, I think, asked about the outdoor performance spaces, that's what it's called.
Classroom.
But outdoor classroom, just wanted to ask a more general question along those lines, which is, have you given any other thought to what you would cut if you could not raise all the funds you're asking for here?
We have, and like I mentioned to Donna, I think we looked at the project, and we looked at the design, and it was difficult to imagine not having the playground done all at once. The main playground along with the preschool playground. In regards to the play structures, there's some pretty confusing formulas that go into determining how many play structures you need, number of students using it. And there's all kinds of equations that go into that to determine what you actually need for play structures. The equipment that was chosen wasn't just kind of us throwing darts at a dartboard and saying, you know, yeah, we'd like those 12 pieces of equipment. That's why we brought in the design firm to figure out exactly what would be required of us to make it. The actual playground equipment that we've chosen for the design. There's not much room, I don't think, there to make any cuts. I think that, going back to, I think if there was something that could maybe be phased in, maybe it would be the outdoor classroom.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All set, John. Just understand, I know Chris knows this, but this is for you. After the board does its deliberation, we follow-up questions at some point. So I know Sean's going to be stepping in, but you might want to keep in touch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
James?
It's hard to believe it's been 25 years since the last one went up. I remember,
James had a hammer and nail out there with me, too.
I remember. Yeah. Well, it clearly needs to be replaced, and you guys have a good proposal. As you're hearing from the other members, there's a lot of projects proposed for this year, so there may be some competition for the funding. So that other grants and fundraising may be a good idea. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bob?
Yeah, you've answered some of the questions, but how many students typically are there on the playground
At a given
during
time?
school? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's K through 4, and they access the playground one grade at a time. It varies obviously from year to year, the number of students per class, but anywhere from 100 to 125.
And you did mention that there is a complex formula on how many pieces of equipment to
Yeah.
have, and does the state have a recommendation on that, or is that strictly the consultants come up with that number?
Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate for me to ask, there's a representative from the design firm here, would it be appropriate to ask them
Justin, you got the floor.
to answer that?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Nancy White, and I was the playground inspector for the school department. I've communicated an awful lot with the design firm on a regular basis. When it comes to preschools, they, at public schools, they do need to be fenced in. They need to have 75 square feet per child. The fencing needs to be 4 feet high. There needs to be appropriate shade. Those are 3 of the major things that have to happen. So the preschool would not be able to use the rest of the equipment that would be there, but all of the equipment, including the preschool, would be appropriate for the remainder of the kids. So there's additional equipment. Preschool usually is that they are not out at the same time elementary school is. It's just a different shift, may change here, I don't know. One thing that I can tell you, and I think this is really important, I've been in the industry for over 40 years. I was absolutely amazed at the number of children that are out there at one time. That's very high, considering a Cape Town. This is a very, very high number. As for those numbers that you're talking about, it has to do with use zones and what is required out there based on the American Society of Testing Materials. A lot of different regulations or guidelines that are there that have been designed over the years based on testing, emergency information. And so a lot of the things that have changed have to do with the space is because of the use zones and the health and safety. Okay.
And
Bob, can I hold you for 1 second? Quick question. Are you a state certified?
No, I'm
Could you
certified.
explain that? Because I wasn't
Yeah,
quite
I know,
clear.
who knew, right? The National Recreation and Park Association 15 or 20 years ago established a program because there was a lack of a program. People weren't taking care of playgrounds. However, the Consumer Product Safety Commission guidelines has been out for 40, 50 years. The American Society of Testing Materials, and there's multiple numbers, has to do with the manufacturing of products, surfacing, similar to a bike helmet, same thing, another ASTM. When this program started, it was primarily to identify in a proper way hazards in a variety of different aspects. Number one hazard being, the worst that you could have, probability, possibility, and utilizing all the percentages of injuries over the years. The number one way children get hurt, it's the fall onto the surface. The number one piece of equipment children get hurt on, the swings. They run in front of each other. The percentages and the documentation is there. And you need to go to a playground and watch because, of course, they play very differently than we expect them to play. And one thing I can tell you with Castle in the Clouds, it's like driving in Boston. They're hitting each other. And that has to do with
Okay,
use zones.
I pretty much get that. My question again is, are you certified by the state?
No,
You're not?
no.
So you're not a state,
There is no state. They're the only states, no, I'm certified nationally by the known National Recreation and Park Association, which is the largest association that has to do with parks and recreation industry, including the industry manufacturers and surfacing manufacturers and all of the technical aspects. And that was the reason to lessen because of the number of accidents. I happen to be one of the only, if the only third party in New England, but there are 6,000 inspectors. And I perform inspections and audits and do consulting at times. But
and you
I
were
have
hired to do,
I was hired to do 2 audits, and the initial audits were on the Castle in the Clouds and the preschool as separate, because they are separate entities.
okay.
And then I was asked back to review my own audit and to see where it was.
Thank you. Bobby?
Yeah,
Okay.
and what, how is the type of equipment selected? In other words, swings versus climbing. I noticed there's a lot of climbing
Right.
apparatus
Right.
here, and from when I was there.
Right, I
but,
know. Stainless steel slides were awesome. There are a variety of vestibular activities that children need to grow.
Yeah.
It is true that the more time they're outside, the better they perform in schools.
Right.
And a variety of those experiences, everything from swinging to sliding to spinning to agitation to socialization. And the higher numbers of children that have multiple disabilities, simple disabilities, sensitivity disabilities, down to shade, has created an opportunity for designers to say, now what do I have? How many children do I have? How many kids are or anticipated to be disabled? Does your PT, and start going through all the different things. Schools need some activities differently than other schools, which is great.
Okay. And looking at the all the letters from the school children, the number one request was a zip line, as well as trampolines and a refrigerator for cold drinks. I didn't see any of that in
Well,
the
the
proposal.
trampoline is very easy to explain to you.
I
No,
know.
you can't have that, that's a state law.
That's right.
So there you go. And if the zip lines are, that's for a
Pretty-
small population that can do it, but they
Well,
do.
based on the comments,
I
it's a big
understand.
population.
And the refrigerators, that's up to the principal, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Little levity there?
So anyways, and this, is all the equipment ADA compliant, or the special certain equipment
All the
is?
ADA equipment is ADA accessible as long as I have approachable ability to go to it. Whether I choose to use it or not is up to me or someone that is assisting me, but everything that is on there, along with the traffic patterns to make sure that the accessibility pathways and route of travel is there.
Okay. Changing subject, it was mentioned at the town meeting last night that rent is paid for the lease land. Is that, there isn't, right?
No.
No, because of contract, okay. And only other comment is I am very much in support of the outdoor classroom. I think that's a very important part of education. I just remember in elementary school, that was the best experience when we go outdoors and do a class outdoors. That's it.
All set. Joe?
So a lot of my questions were answered, but on the audit that Nancy did, so that determined the type of equipment that we ended up with, is that right?
Yes and no. The audit that she did, there were some recommendations, but what we did as a committee and when we sat with the design firm, DeVellis Zrain was the firm, we looked at kind of what was out there for modern equipment, and we talked to the teachers. We kind of did like our own needs assessment, and we found out, from special ed teachers, from different grade level teachers, we kind of polled around everybody to figure out what kind of stimulation the kids were looking for and what they needed. And that's was the biggest driving factor probably in some of the equipment that we chose as far as the specific equipment.
Itself on the money, who came up with this, all the total costs?
The cost estimate?
Yeah.
That was from DeVellis Zrain, the design firm that was hired.
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask. So it is the design firm that came up with the numbers. And down the bottom, which is really in fine print, but a very important number, I know Chris deals with this all the time in the town, no lighting or electrical scope is identified. Are there lights there now? Is there electricity feeding to this place now that has
To the
been
playground
cut off?
itself, there's really no lighting out there. There's the lighting around the loop that has a few parking spots on
Okay.
it. So there's really not a huge electrical component in existence already.
Okay. That's great. And then the last thing is, on these numbers, are you good with these numbers? I mean, are we gonna have overruns at the end of the day, other than what's gonna happen with the cost of lumber or the cost of these pieces, you know what I mean?
As far as, are we expecting the numbers to be smaller than those?
Bigger.
Bigger? No, I don't think that we would expect the number to be bigger.
That's rather a tough question to ask, to project an overrun.
It is hard.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that
it's-
based upon some of the estimates, they went to some of these items are on the state bid list, but certainly bid list items are reliable, but they also have a window of time, so they get adjusted as time moves forward. So, yeah, I think there's a contingency on there,
There's a
which
10%
hopefully would.
That was
contingency
good,
built
yeah,
in.
I thought that was
adjust
good.
for some of
I
that.
635 is not gonna become 935. I mean, we're fairly close, is my question.
Yeah, I think that was, part of why it's got the 10% contingency in there, for
Okay.
some cost fluctuations and stuff like that.
Thanks so much.
Mary?
So, commend you for all of the work that was done. Personally, a little disappointed that we didn't start hearing about some of this last year, if it's been going on so long. I don't think that's on you. I think that's really communication between the school department and the town. Couple of questions that I had, and I think it's through you to Chris, if I could. Do we know where the delineation is between the cultural center property and the elementary school property?
The material was in there.
So I couldn't see the delineation line myself on the,
Basically behind the,
I know it said it was there, and I just,
basketball courts, behind the
Yeah, behind
basketball
the
courts, it
basketball
goes
courts.
straight across.
was straight basketball courts.
This is clearly within the area of
Okay.
Monomoy.
I think it's in section G there.
Yeah, I think that is the line. That's supposed to be the exclusive
okay.
use
I got
line.
you.
Oh, there, I see the note, thank you. Second question was, two maps. We see the basketball courts. Is there any intention at this point to deal with the basketball courts? Because it looks like on the next page that it looks like it was outlined as part of a phase 2,
Yeah, so
courts and pickleball.
so the design that you're seeing with those phases in it, when we sat as a committee and we had the captive audience of the design firm there, we thought it would be prudent to kind of look ahead at the whole space back there behind the cultural center, and kind of, while we had them, kind of, working on a plan for the playground, and it's kind of, we know that it's separate properties, but we wanted to kind of come up with a vision as to how this could expand into a community park and really, you know, have a greater benefit to the community. So part of that was redoing the basketball courts, and looking at the baseball fields, which both the courts and the fields back there are borderline unusable at this point. But that's not what we're looking at for this project. We're looking at playground.
Yeah, it's been my experience here in the town that, you know, the town doesn't like surprises. Don't come in with phase one and then say, oops, I have phase two
Right.
and three. So they were encouraged very early on to look at the entire site and put together a site plan that would address all those elements.
So at this point, we're looking, this parking lot already exists, or is that a new parking lot
The
that's
parking
going
lot
in?
outlined in green? Is that what
Yes.
that does not exist. That would be,
That would be new.
that's, the 10 spot, lot that's indicated on your, budget sheet.
And is the preschool lot, this one in kind of the top? And where would your preschool lot be versus your,
So the playground design has, kind of contiguous walkways that go around the perimeter of it, so there would be one lot that would service the entire playground.
But I think she's asking.
I'm just
is it
asking which section.
Right.
Is it,
Right.
is it the top smaller section?
Oh, the preschool playground
Yes.
itself? Yeah, yep, it's the top section. You can kind of see there's a dark line there through it. If you're looking at the bigger map,
Yep,
it's probably a little bit easier to see. You can see
it's got the
that,
darker line around it,
yeah,
the
it kinda
heavier.
does a little bit of a zigzag.
Okay. All for me from right now.
Okay. Most of my questions have been answered. Actually, I was really interested in what KP Law had to say, and especially when it came to the amount of time that the residents have at the facility if it's built. And according to this document, it says furthermore, there's no CPA requirement to the facilities funded under the CPA to the general public at all times. I was unaware of that. It's not the information I had. So that provides a lot of clarification for me. The other issues I have were the existing unit. It's a moot point. It's gone. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to the general public. Would anybody like to please speak? Please come to the microphone, identify yourself.
Good evening, committee. My name is Ashley Cook, and I'm a town resident. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight about the proposed community projects. I'm a Harwich High School graduate. I graduated high school in 2005. I've worked at the Harwich Elementary School and Monomoy Regional School since 2004. I'm a mother of 3 children, ages 8, 6, and 2. I'm deeply invested in the playground project and sit as a member of the playground committee. I was only 7 years old when Castle in the Clouds was built, but I was able to enjoy the playground as a child, supervise students during my after-school tenure, during my tenure with the after-school program, and then as an educator for the Monomoy Regional School District. It was truly heartbreaking to see our beloved Castle in the Clouds dismantled. After reading the reports, it was a no-brainer that the playground had outlived its use and was unsafe for students and residents of the town. I joined the committee to ensure that the students and children in the town will have a safe and inclusive playground to enjoy for years to come. It is well known that Castle in the Clouds is one of the best playgrounds on Cape Cod. Of all of the weekend trips to the playground, Castle in the Clouds was always my children and my own favorite. With the demolition of the playground, we as a community are left with only one playground in town, at Brooks Park. I hope that the CPC committee will vote to support the funding for the community project and bring back an important asset to our community. The proposed playground will allow each student and families an opportunity to enjoy the facility. Being ADA compliant, students who currently do not have access to our playground will finally have a safe space to play with their peers. Our concept design has tried to accommodate each niche of our community with structures to climb, swing, open space for pickup games, a state-compliant preschool playground, a circular walking track for adults, and a passive, shaded area for students to catch up with friends. As we work to develop plans for this playground, and the betterment of our community has been our foremost priority. The proposed playground will not only serve the daily 500-plus students at Harwich Elementary School, but our community as a whole, and hopefully generations to come. It would be amazing if my own children are able to enjoy memories with their children in the future, as I have been fortunate enough to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else care to speak? Please identify yourself and
Janelle Brown, Harwich resident, as well as mother of a fourth grader currently at Harwich Elementary. I was here last night and I had a couple questions that also have been answered, but I did want to make a couple of points about the way things went last night that I think are important going forward. The fact that the town has now made themselves a co-applicant with the regional school district kind of changes the whole.
Janelle, not to correct you, but the town is the applicant, not the co-applicant.
Okay, you're right. I remember that now. Sorry. What did we decide last night?
They're gonna, well, I'm gonna let the town administrator answer that one.
See, you led down a path that I didn't want to go.
I know that.
The town is the owner of the property. By the IMA, it says that any project change would be by mutual consent. So the attorney said that it should actually be applicant because mutual consent means mutual consent.
Oh.
Okay, well.
Does that help answer?
No, but that's okay. Because the point I'm trying to make is, town administrator said something last night. I watched the meeting one more time before he said that it's traditional that once the project is designed by a committee, that the committee will then turn it over to the town to construct it. So basically, he was saying, I believe Tina Games was here at the time, he was saying, thank you, the committee has done their work, we'll take it from here, was what I got from that conversation. If that is true, my suggestion and my ask as a citizen is that a new committee be formed with town people and town representatives, including Sean Libby, who know how to put projects like this together. Because while the committee has done a great job, none of them have experience doing this previously. And the number is astronomical. To ask for CPC funds 100%, there is no money from the budget. That was asked of Mr. Carpenter last night. There's no money allocated in the budget to put together this playground that they dismantled. For the coming year. They're relying 100% on CPC as well as fundraising. And while a fun run is great for $30,000, a $680,000 playground is not gonna get fundraised with a fun run around the gym. So I would ask that now that the town is the applicant, that the town actually take over from here with some maybe a few members from the previous committee who are Harwich residents being part of the new committee. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up. The other thing I would ask, I have a question about is the Harwich Observatory, if that was taken into account at all, because I know that that is something that people come from far and wide all over Cape Cod to partake in the star parties. And I haven't heard anything mentioned about it, where it will now reside. Let's see, what else? Oh, the outdoor classroom, Mr. Doan, you had brought that up. I brought that up I went to the meeting last week at Harwich Elementary School. Unfortunately, there were only about 6 parents there. And I did ask about the outdoor classroom. And I was told it's not really an outdoor classroom, it's a shaded area. So while I also thought, oh, it's a classroom where classes will be conducted, it's not. It's simply a shaded area of a playground. I don't know why it has an extra fee attached to it of $35,000 and it isn't part of the playground proper. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think it was $23,000 or something just for the shade structure itself, which is plastic. One of the parents there asked if there were any trees going to be planted. No trees are being planted. I think that's a travesty. I think we should also think about some nature out there. The $180,000 poured rubber surface is something that concerns me. People I've talked to in the community that do this type of work have said that number is astronomical, that number should really be looked at. That can be done for anywhere from $5 to $15 per square foot, not 18. That's really all I wanted to bring up at this point. I did email the chair. I assume you shared it with everybody, Mr. Nixon. I did have specific questions, and I'm not going to belabor the points that I've already brought up, but thank you for your time.
Okay, Janelle, first, I didn't email it to the board because the presentation hadn't been made first.
Shall I do that?
You can do that. You have the ability to do that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Before you leave, Chris?
Yeah, just to the comments that were made, what I said last night, I still stand by them. But when you design something and you have it ready to go, then it just needs to be built. You don't redesign as you build. So my point, and I think the selectmen, and I know a couple of them are here tonight, that when the project is designed, what's designed will then be turned over to Mr. Libby. He doesn't redesign things, he just builds what we give him. And that was my point last night. So, and I didn't hear from the selectmen that they wanted to redesign, that they were comfortable that the professionalism was done in the design. They just wanted to make sure that the procurement was done by the town and that the construction oversight was also agreed to by the town.
And that's what the chair heard last night at that meeting also. Would you like to address the shade?
Yeah, the outdoor classroom, I don't think it was, can't remember the words specifically that were used at last week's parent meeting. It's a multi-purpose shade structure. It's labeled as an outdoor classroom because it can be used as an outdoor classroom. There's seating, it has a shade structure, and it has an area for teachers to bring their students outside to learn in nature, to learn outside, to have fresh air, get out of the classroom when they need to. They can conduct classrooms out there if there's not recess going on. They can do role playing, they can do creative play. It's an area also for students to get out of the sun if they need to during recess. And it's also an area for caregivers in the summer months as their grandchildren or children are playing that can go under a shade structure and have adequate seating, or for the children to go under there and play as well. So outdoor classroom, I'm not sure how to best label it because it's a multi-purpose area, but part of its purpose is to be an outdoor classroom.
And if I sound repetitive, did you prioritize that
As far
as the overall project's concerned?
as far as being built into the,
Yes.
we would like it all to be part of the main project, but as Donna pointed out with her first comments, would that be something that could potentially be phased? And I think if something could be phased around, that would probably be one area that could.
Okay, so that's clear to everybody.
Mr. Nixon,
You have the floor.
if you don't mind, 2 more things I just thought of. So for those of you who have not been over to Harwich Elementary School, it's basically a square with an indoor courtyard, which is a garden. And that garden is only accessible from inside the building. It is not accessible by the general public at all, ever. And I do know that I used to actually coordinate garden classes out there for the last few years. And I do know that some of the teachers use that as their outdoor classroom currently. See why we would need to add another outdoor classroom when we already have that space that is totally protected and inaccessible to the general public. And it's quite large a space. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is the parking lot. That could also go 10 extra parking spaces. CPC specifically says replacement of playground equipment. It does not mention building a parking lot. And for $25,000, I think that's something that should be looked at as well. I support building a playground. This number is astronomical. I'm thinking around the number around $300,000. That's what resonates with me. I don't know why everybody's laughing, because it can be done with fundraising. I mean, everybody wants to just have CPC pay for everything. I think there's enough money in our community where we can fundraise the rest. Why are we asking for all of the money to come from our taxes? Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Sure,
I'm
sure.
sorry,
Could
Justin?
Could I just address a
Sure,
couple
go
of
ahead,
other,
Justin.
Ms. Brown's comments? In Observatory, I did have a conversation with Mr. Burkhart today. He reached out and called me. He had some questions about the observatory and how the playground might affect star parties and his telescopes and equipment. He was concerned about lighting and would there be, would the playground be lit up like a Christmas tree at nighttime? And there's nothing in the design to suggest that would be the case. He didn't have really a whole lot of other concern outside of that as far as the observatory is concerned. And just to circle back around on the outdoor classroom, the courtyard and the gardens in the courtyard have been an initiative over the last couple of years from the principal and from the school council to regenerate interest in the courtyard and the gardens that are out there. However, it's protected from the outside world because it's internal to the school. But just to clarify, there is no actual exposure protection out there in regards to shade from the sun or from the elements.
And if I could just
Mr. Administrator.
elaborate, I always get a fear factor when people say, well, I got a price quote from somebody on the street and it was only $5 to $15. Municipal world and government, we have to pay prevailing wage. There's no option, you have to pay it. And prevailing wage is not just the base rate, but it's the employee benefits and everything else. So it does traditionally be a little bit higher. So, if you're gonna compare, you have to compare based upon the actual prevailing wage sheets that we need to obtain. No flexibility.
Okay. Young lady at the podium.
Thank you. I haven't been called that in a while. I'm Sharon Stout, and I'm a long-term time resident of Harwich, and I'm elected member of the school committee. And I would like to say that I was also surprised about the amount that this came in at. And I did contact a number of other people in other areas of Massachusetts, school committee members, and it's not an unusual amount. If it can be done for less, that would be great. The thing that I'm really up here to say is basically to address the committee, because it's very disturbing to me when I hear things about the school versus the town. Here we're talking about children. We've had a group of people that have spent a lot of time on this playground. They're being torn apart. And I think that as far as other people that might not be happy for them to join this group, if they have other expertise, that would be great. But this is for the town's children, most of which are being used during the school day. The people that are involved with the town's children in school are the ones that best know that. So I wouldn't like to see a large member of those people removed. So.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm Mary Oldak, proud principal of Harwich Elementary School. First, I'd like to just address some of the questions that have been raised this evening. Our budget does include a landscaping allowance, which is right for community donation and absolutely may include trees. The parking lot includes handicapped accessible spaces, which are needed in close proximity to this playground. The CPC is not going to pay for everything. The school district has already funded at least $50,000 in the design work and the reimbursement of the demolition work. The PTO and Castle and the Clouds funds that were paid forward from the original committee amount to about $40,000. The committee has been operating on a very aggressive time frame since last November with the intention of hitting the October 1 deadline for this funding application. We have lists of grants that are being vetted by our committee and community members who have already expressed interest in donating time and services in excavating, landscaping, masonry work, and other trade services. I would also like to read off a list of the members of the committee, and I will just, as I read off these names, I will just designate it who is a Harwich community member and who is not. Eric Beebe, who is not a Harwich community member. He lives in Dennis, but he is our town recreation director. Ashley Cook, who spoke tonight, who's a town resident. Erin Cronin, who's here tonight as a teacher. She does not live in Harwich. Katie Cutter, the HCS PTO president, who is a Harwich. Tina Games, our school committee member representative, who is a Harwich resident. Mark Haley, the president of the Little League, who is a Harwich resident. Sharon Hughes, our assistant principal, who lives in Yarmouth. Katie Isternio, our business manager, who is not a Harwich resident, but is a district employee, our business manager. Joy Jordan, who is a Harwich resident. John Larrabee, who is a Harwich resident. I live in Dennis. Emily Reed is a Harwich resident. Reeves is a Harwich resident. Rick Soroy, our lead custodian, lives in Dennis. Leanne Smith is a Harwich resident. Justin Tavano is a Harwich resident. And finally, our facilities director, Rick Travers, lives off Cape. So as you can see, the vast majority of our committee members are Harwich residents. I would just like to begin by thanking the Board of Selectmen for their willingness to take on the Harwich Community Playground funding application so the project may be heard by the CPC this evening on behalf of our school and community. This project started about a year ago after our school was in receipt of the playground safety completed by the Playground Inspections of New England, which highlighted the safety concerns and lack of ADA compliance with both the preschool and Castle in the Clouds playground at our school. The Playground Committee has worked over the last year to present to you this evening the application which you have before you. This committee is represented by multi-generational Harwich families, the Town of Harwich Recreation Director, coaches, parents of all grade levels at our school, teachers, facility staff, instructional assistants, and Harwich Elementary alumni who remember the thrill the Castle in the Clouds community built in 1994. We have listed of Harwich children and their ideas for the inclusion of their very own classmates, places for group play, a quiet space to sit and chat with a friend, shade, climbing, monkey bars, lots of swings, a tire swing, and theatrical play. We smiled and put aside ideas for the zip lines and refrigerators, however, as Mr. Doan noted. It is unfortunate that along the way, the passive recreation space became tagged as an outdoor classroom and is now seems to be controversial. This space is a shaded pavilion with multi-purpose seating that, yes, can be used as an outdoor classroom that our teachers are very excited about, but also as a family picnic area or a place from which parents, baby brothers and sisters, and grandparents can supervise their family at play. The modern day playground is surprisingly expensive, and the committee has worked with licensed designers and inspectors to design a play space that stimulates the imagination and cooperative play where many of life's lessons are learned in practice. We do have 3 students in wheelchairs and students with other mobility concerns, as well as staff with mobility concerns. Parents, grandparents, and visitors with mobility issues, all who deserve a fully inclusive playground to enjoy during the school day and by the community on afternoons, weekends, and summer months. As we move forward with this exciting community playground, I ask the CPC to please keep in mind that this project is to replace 2 playgrounds, not just Castle in the Clouds, but also the preschool playground, which is not ADA compliant and has significant safety concerns as well. So when you evaluate the cost of this playground, please consider that HES is one of the largest elementary schools on Cape Cod, and this project serves all of our students, preschool to 4th grade, representing 552 children as of today who play on it every school day. The Harwich Elementary School community thanks you for your consideration and asks you to support this project with the urgency and financial support for our children. Thank you.
Question. Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Mary, I just wanted, on the numbers.
Keep it within the scope.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you mentioned $50,000 in design and demo that you've already paid for through the school district. And then there was another thing on 40,000, but I didn't hear what that was for.
I can tell you that the 40,000 is roughly the proceeds from the fun run. And when Castle in the Clouds, Mr. Howe presented the district with a check from the account from Castle in the Clouds, which was $6,000 and some dollars. I don't remember the exact amount, but it was $6,000 and some dollars, so I'm just rounding up to 40,000. The 33 plus the 6,000 and some is sitting in our playground fund at the district.
Okay, that's great, thanks.
Anybody? The podium's here. Thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Tom Blute, and I am here as a citizen of Harwich with no children currently in the school system. I am here because I really did not know much about this project, and I've been following it loosely. I came and I watched an overwhelmingly well-prepared, well-documented presentation. I'm encouraged by the degree of questions from your committee, and I appreciate the task that you all have volunteered for, because it is very, very difficult. I appreciate Janelle coming up, bringing up certain questions and issues, because we all know that the only way everything gets resolved is by communication and putting things out there. And even the best boards and panels and committees cannot cover every particular item or article that we'll come across. So that being said, I'm in favor of this as a townsperson, again, without children here in town, but perhaps future generations of my family will take advantage. I would like to thank the schools, especially the teachers, who take our children out to a now barren playground, and the efforts that they have to make, because they've already gone from busy days. Now they are full active participants, which is kind of cool, because there'll be old school games like tag and jump rope and all those forgotten athletic activities. But
Tom, whose side are you on?
we really project. I mean, look at everybody from every angle is getting together, and even those with questions are in full support. So I can't wait to see the completed project, hopefully sooner than later. And I want to thank you for your participation, which I'm strongly encouraged will be there. Thank you.
Please identify yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jim DeVellis, and I'm the owner of DeVellis Arene. So I'm the firm committee hired to do the landscape architecture and civil engineering. And in return, I hired Nancy, because playgrounds are an incredibly specialized item. I don't take on projects unless I have a consultant. And in this case, aside from MAAB and the ADA, the issues of what you put there, and it's not a cookie cutter. So we need a lot of input from the community. So I just wanted to talk briefly on two items. And I've been sitting on both sides of the table. I'm a long-term committee member in my town, and we bring in committees. So the two things, what I was hired to do was design a playground. It was not to design a parking lot or basketball courts or master plan. I'm not even paid to be here tonight. My scope was give you a project and then, can go through the process. What struck me with the committee, and to be honest with you, I didn't know who was a Harwich resident and who was not a Harwich resident, but when I got hired, one of the first things that the committee did was had a full scope session of teachers and committees, and they reached out to families and their kids. And yes, we got zip line requests and refrigerators. We heard from the nurse, please don't put a jungle gym, because these are the statistics. My wife's a school nurse. So we spent a lot of time with this committee. We met over the summer when teachers were gone, but they came back in. And it was such a great committee, full of passion. And when I put committees together in my town, I look for that in the professionalism. I don't look for the zip code, because you get a bunch of zip codes that bring in issues of their own that may not be the best interest. So I just want to assure you, I've been doing this for 30 years. The experience I've had with this town committee has been phenomenal. That's why I'm here tonight. And the other item, just briefly on cost, one of the first things I said to the committee, and if you remember it, this is not your grandfather's playground. You cannot build a telephone pressure-treated playground anymore. When we used to design them, you wanted kids to hide in the nooks and crannies.
So that definitely is not in reference to the chair.
I'm missing the humor, but I'll laugh, I guess. I'm not sure what you're saying. But we can't do those playgrounds anymore, and nor do we want to, because of security issues and things like that. The first thing I did when I saw the playground is, what a shame. It's a beautiful piece of art, and it has been maintained more than most playgrounds that I've seen, but it did need to go. And what you bring in, you look at a swing set, you used to buy them, you can't get a swing set for under $20,000 now, and then you do the public bid process. These numbers are real numbers. We just finished a phenomenal project over in Eastham, similar demographic, similar town. Half of my work is private, half of it is public, and these numbers go through professional consulting estimators. So if we say $18 a square foot for poured-in-place resilient surface that is per spec, that's going to last for a long time, there are contractors that will say, I can do that for $5. And my job is to say, you cannot do that for $5, because you'll be in here in 18 months under warranty removing it. That $18 to come up with the numbers represents base material, compaction, resilient surface with a respectable warranty. So they are, I wouldn't say they are astronomical, but they're accurate, and that's what you need to do for a playground to address not only the students that you have that are handicapped or need handicapped accessible structures, but 5 years from now, handicapped is not just a wheelchair. So you got to understand, this is built for a time where you're not going to say, well, we should have done something different or ripped this up and put something in 2 years. It's been well thought out, and it's been a phenomenal committee to work for. So, thank you.
Thank you. Chris, would you, just out of curiosity's sake, when RFPs go out for the town, we're talking apples and apples. There's X amount of things that are on the print that get sent out, and you're bidding on those X amount of units. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think in terms of this, the state has changed by having it on the state bid list. So you would have that state bid list already out there. There would be vendors in the area. They do require, if we take something off the state bid list, that we then have to send it out to those, let's say there's 5 people that have the shark concept that they offer. You have to then send to the 5, would you do better than the state bid? So it requires an additional step for bidding. So that would be one option, is to use the state bid list numbers to be able to then build off of that. The second is, you don't need to use the state bid, and you could do a RFP or an invitation for bid, IFB, and put it out separately and construct it that way as well. So there's two means to basically do it.
Is there a preference for the town on either side?
I think in terms of, I think if you look at the state bid list, in general, the state bid list numbers, it saves you the time and energy of putting together the spec. So they do tend to be on target, or sometimes a little bit higher, because they're covering a larger geographic area for bids. But I think that's something that could be looked at.
Donna?
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? So the equipment you're going to purchase off the state bid list, the installation for it, are you also going to do that through the state contract, or are you going to do that separately as an invitation to bid?
Yeah, I don't know if the state bid includes installation. Sometimes they separate them, sometimes they don't. I'm just not that familiar with that.
Well, and then I'm just looking at a few of these items, right? Like we know some of the landscaping items, loam and seed, some of the bituminous concrete walks. Those are things that we can also purchase off of a county bid list. So, I mean, I do think there's some opportunity here to bid it in a certain way so that there could be savings. It might not be, you know, get you all the way there, but it might help the process.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Okay.
We could work with Sean to do that. The other thing is, you know, DPW, I had to hold Link Bank, you know, back to hurry up and get out there. I mean, he wanted to get out there and do that work. So, you know, we do have some in-house talent and capabilities too to, you know, make sure that this works. And I'm sure there are other volunteers that would want to help as well.
Can I ask one other
Go ahead.
follow-up question? On the preschool component, there's a Harwich integrated preschool there. Is the Y also there now? Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
they are.
all right. And will there be, in the future, a maintenance line item built into the school to maintain this playground once it's built?
Yes. According to the superintendent, yes.
Okay.
It's not my budget, so I want him to take responsibility for it.
They're all your budgets,
They're all my,
Chris. Okay, thank you.
All righty. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the project? Hearing none, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you, great job. Oh, and these kids were amazing. All of
I
you
know,
should
right?
be
I'm
so
serious.
proud of your children.
Never have heard so much about it. I don't think this pen is my friend.
You bribed them? You did really well.
Does anybody need a recess for a few minutes?
Yeah, I just gotta get some more water.
Okay. The board's going to take a 5-minute recess, please.
Thank you again to the committee.
Behind the screen there, is that Kayla?
Back to order, please. The next representative for the Affordable Housing Trust, part-time housing coordinator. Oh, it says 6:45.
You're late.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start off, but Christopher Clark again, actually Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. I have this evening Don Howell, the Vice Chair, and Brendan Lowney, a member, also accompanying me. We do have a request in for $50,000 for the Affordable Housing Trust to continue the efforts of the trust. In terms of the allocation, it would be $500,000 towards housing-related efforts and $50,000 for consultant efforts to help us with the staff of the part-time position. In terms of, the chair did kind of give me a indication that there was some concerns in regards to the efforts of the trust and how much progress we've made. So I think I want to at least address that or comment on that. The trust was governed and created by town meeting, but it's a trust, so it had to be officially formed. So we were formed. It's been, I think it was October of last year. So we've been in operation for just over a year. In that time, we have also gone to town meeting to identify parcels of land to have for housing purposes. And we were successful at the most recent town meeting in 19, which is this past May, to identify 4 parcels for consideration. We have been actively looking at 2 of those parcels, one on Oak. A determination was made that it had limited use for housing, so we are looking at potentially doing, we had a quote for $13,000 to have that parcel be kind of reviewed for different site considerations, pre-development considerations. Upland considerations, and to see if we could then turn around and market that to entities like Habitat for Humanity and other groups to see if they could actually make use of that through the bid process. The other one of those 4 parcels was over here on Sisson Road that currently the facility itself is leased out to the Harwich Junior Theater. I know they've changed their name, I just haven't figured out their new name yet. But Harwich Junior Theater, and on that site, it was anticipated back in 2005, 2008? In 5, that there was a pre-development done then and a concept of having 2 multi-unit dwellings on there. I think it was 8 units each.
2 quads.
So that would be 16 units in total?
We never actually considered that.
Oh, you did not
That was
consider
hack, it was withdrawn.
Okay.
It was 2 quads.
But we have that material that was done back in the 2005 time period is under active consideration from the Mass Housing Partnership. They're doing the pre-development work on that. In terms of, we have currently $800,000 to have an additional $500 would obviously help that effort. Anything we're going to do in terms of trying to construct a building or buildings is going to require some additional assistance in terms of that. So that money will be allocated for really 2 purposes, potentially 3 purposes. One would be to do the development on the land. These are town-owned parcels, so hopefully the use of having town-owned land, we take away the cost of the land, which should help towards the affordability. So in terms of those projects, we would need money to put towards the construction of the homes themselves. We have been fairly successful where we've had developers have come out from the private sector to approach us and ask for, or potentially indicate that they may ask for funding to help with 2 developments, 2 developments that have been publicly discussed. One is over the Wise development in East Harwich. He initially came in, did not ask for money, and came back and said that he was going to consider asking for some money. These projects, in this case, are probably $20 to $30 million. These are big projects. And then our cost or our buy-in to that would be obviously substantially a smaller part or fraction of it. And then we had the company over on Sisson Road Development? Penrose, thank you. Penrose has also approached us about doing potentially, I think, upwards of 50. Why 50? Because that's the number for the state to provide some funding, as well as private entities to provide funding, so you have to have a certain order of mass. So we have 2 parties that have approached us. The Penrose development people.
Real quick, do you have a number for the second, what it would cost for those 50?
Can I interject? We know of 2 developers. We have not been approached with a number or an ask. There is no position on the part of the trust to support any particular project.
In terms of Penrose, they did do a development, just for frame of reference, up in Eastham. And the Eastham, I think the town of Eastham generated, and they did present that as part of it, I think it was about $1.5 million in town money, some from CPC, some directly from the town. The town did directly supply some water resources for them. So just, they will be asking, these larger developers will be asking for some contribution by the town. So, and if it is in the neighborhood of $1 million, we only have 800,000, hence you can see the need for the additional resources. Really, that's the reason why I wanted to bring those up. The other is more of, I know Don has brought this up in the past, if we get approached by individual homeowners that want to convert their house or do some work to make it affordable, we have not had a lot of activity on that front.
We have no rehab program at the moment.
But that's something that when we do, we have a goals plan that's being worked on, and that will be one of the elements that we want to encourage people to come in. I know the Housing Authority has a request before you for $200,000 for rental assistance, and I think doing some housing rehabilitation too. That's something that would obviously be part of one of the 3 elements that the trust would engage in if they came forward, different elements of the community. But I just wanted to provide a little bit of an overview in terms of that. We did contract, actually, just at our last meeting, contracted to do our overall plan, action plan, so that way we can have a little bit more form and function to our approach. What I've kind of laid out is kind of broad strokes of what we've been working on since the time the trust has been formed.
Don, anything?
Yeah, I'm most passionate about the 50,000 part of this, because town's plowing money in lease of the cell tower out on Route 39, has been voting to dump that in by basis of the prior town meeting vote that allowed us to, the Board of Selectmen, to disperse money to affordable housing projects. So that's been happening already. We're not what I would consider to be critical mass in terms of being able to move on something quickly if a property became available. What we've done so far is we've had staff time that priced out at 30,000. Whether that's in-house or contracted, it doesn't much matter, because that was for a half a year. So the 30 wouldn't do very much in terms of staff support. We definitely need a housing plan. And that's...
I want to hold you there, because the original application said that it was going to be in-house. That was on the original application.
I'm just saying that globally it
Got
wouldn't
it,
matter.
got
We
it.
just
wanted
need
to
that
make sure that
support.
was there. Go ahead.
We need that support, and just so everybody is understanding, because James is actually part of that in the last town meeting, whenever we're looking at them relative to control by the Board of Selectmen. That doesn't do away with the requirements for Conscom or Planning Board and setbacks, staying away from vernal pools. We started getting involved with some of this. Looked like it would be really advantageous, but that appears to be fraught with groundwater problems. And one of the ones that I was looking at, because under law we're allowed to take jurisdictional property and flip it and take it and go out and spend and buy it in another area if we feel like we can get better bang for the buck. We had a property that was located, was it Earl?
Earl Road.
Yeah, Earl Road. It isn't really under the selectmen's jurisdiction as we started delving into it. That would have provided a fairly hefty pool of liquidity to be able to go out and do something. Where we're at now, what we're essentially doing is we don't have any commercial projects that are actually ready to go and have an ask. We do have some land that we definitely would like, because I hate speculating. I mean, we wanted to be able to get some engineering out there on the properties under our jurisdiction to be able to ascertain whether it was buildable and at what magnitude, because MHP won't do too much if it doesn't have a critical mass. Having said that, as I said, we're not really at the point where we're doing a lot, but you definitely have to have the money on hand, or else you can't jump on something if it becomes available. What that number is, as far as you can afford it within the bucket of affordable housing, is up to you folks. But I mean, we definitely need to have something available to us, and that's really where we're at. In the last couple of years, it's just been a buildup. And I will say this, because Bob Murray and I were personal friends, and I gotta say that one of the comments that he used to make is applicable to this situation. The last thing in the world I wanna see happen is that we just siphon out money to do reports and studies. And if it doesn't have a roof over somebody's head, it's not a high priority. So I personally am not really in favor of just getting stuff and doing engineering studies and doing solicitations for services. It's got to have an end game that has somebody living somewhere. So I'm pretty sure Brendan's all in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you point to Oak Street. Oak Street was an
Would you please identify yourself?
I'm sorry, my name is Brendan Lowney, and
He's a member.
I'm a member. Yes, thank you. I think Oak Street was a great example. We started looking at that property and we were thinking 8, 10, 12 units, and in the end, it's only viable for one single-family home. So there's going to be each property's going to be different, but it'd be nice to capitalize on when one comes across our plate.
I just want to, in terms of any of these projects that come forward, we obviously can't just partner up with someone, but what we would do is to do a request for proposals, say, we're interested in partnering with people. If you have X number of lots, that would get us towards, the target numbers that we're looking for, towards the 10%, that the town has, X amount of dollars available to partner, and then see who is out there. So before we do any of that, you have to have somebody in the marketplace. So the fact that we've had people come to us and at least talk to us is, I think, a very encouraging sign. And then just in terms of the $50,000, one of the things that we have CDP, the consultant, doing is that they are looking at and monitoring all the current units. So some of the units that we have a 25-year lifespan to them, and then that affordability falls off. So we're trying to make sure we understand what is our current inventory, because we don't want to necessarily add to the inventory and then lose it by not paying attention to those units that are coming up. So there's a lot of work that is going in, I think is to the point, that is going in to help with the support of the operation. So the $50,000 is critical to keeping us moving. And if we did do it in-house, I mean, we would potentially, have to be paying benefits and so on, to do it correctly. So contracting it out isn't necessarily, it's probably a more cost-effective approach for us at this point.
Oh. Anything else? I'm going to open this up from the board.
Good questions go here. Hard ones go there.
Well, when we initially took the leap of faith, we were basing this on the Yarmouth model. Now, I've had chats with Mary time and time again about this particular proposal. Overall, the trust. And she assured me that within a 3-year period, the trust should have the ability to go out, identify, secure, and act. Now, I have no expertise in this. I'm listening to what an expert is telling me. Now, getting beyond the amounts of money for the individual people that we're hiring, I don't know where that lies. I do know that there's a process and policy in place for this committee, this board, that in 3 years, we re-look at that money. And if there's nothing there, we have the ability to withdraw that money. So is that an incentive for the to turn up the pressure and to find something and act on something? I don't know. That's up to the trust. That's up to all of you. So, go ahead, Don.
You and I go back a long way, so I'm just gonna do the yin to that yang. I agree with you. I'm really, I mean, I have a fairly high urgency level about getting stuff built as opposed to just talking about it. But we're not gonna just simply dump money into the ground because you wanna see us spend something. So.
What I'm asking.
No, I know that, but I'm just
Okay.
saying, I can assure you, we're not gonna just feel heat, so we're just gonna start spending. It has to be something that's meaningful, or we're not gonna spend it.
Well, here's the other argument to that, Don. Where you're asking the CPC to tie up X amount of dollars for X amount of years. When sit there for how long?
For whatever time you have as a limit, because we're not going to play games with that. If you wanna recoup it, then that's your prerogative, because we have full understanding that that money isn't infinitely there. So your guidelines are fine with me. I don't know about the rest of the committee or the trust.
Okay, I'm just trying to spur the incentive to get something
Run.
right. Mary, go ahead. She's jumping at the
I'm
seams.
chomping
here.
at the bit.
Saw that.
Okay, so the first application, yes, was 3 rounds ago. We were asked to take a leap of faith, and we did. And the town followed through. By the next year, when the next round was ready, they had formed the trust. The trust has only been active for 1 year. I understand that this may be the 3rd round of funding.
This is
but
the
we
back
did
and
that-
forth that the vice chair and I have. Go
But
ahead.
we did that for a reason 3 years ago, because it was dedicated affordable housing money. And both the Board of Selectmen made the determination and came to us, and every single one of them was standing here and said, make the leap of faith, trust us, we'll follow through. So far they have. They have.
Again,
And number two, number two, they followed through, they formed the trust. We've been funding it. This was all affordable housing money. So we have a housing production plan that requires 22 units a year to just try and get up to quota. Because we're at 5.5%, we need to make it to 10, and we haven't done 22 units in the last 3 years since the housing production plan has happened. And the only way it's gonna happen is if the trust is given the opportunity to do their thing. They're the ones that have the ability to do larger scale productions. They'll be able to jump at a moment's notice if they have the money to fund it. So from my perspective, what they've done in a year, they have identified, they have researched, they have ruled out some parcels that they couldn't use already. So I, for one, am fairly happy with the amount of production that's happened. Do I think by this time next year, yes, there should be some formal projects on the books, but they do need money. There is affordable housing money that is dedicated. We're required to spend at least 10% on affordable housing projects. So I, for one, am fully supportive of the $500,000 going to the trust. It's so that they can act on projects during the course of the year. They have the ability to purchase land without having to go to town meeting from time to time.
Are you asking a question?
I'm vociferously supporting it, and I'm countering your point that they have not been active for 3 years. They have 3 years of funding.
We'll agree to
But it's-
disagree.
But they have not been active for 3 years, so I, for
Anything
one, am happy about it.
What she said.
Yeah, I know.
Jeez.
Joe, okay. So this is to you, Don, because I've been to several trust meetings, and the comments I hear you say is, we want to get moving on some things. These are the things, this is what you say. And also, I just don't want to spend money on inspections and, nothingness. So the question I have is, this 5-year plan, this action plan, when is the date that this will be done, this plan will be done?
It has to be procured first, but I'm assuming.
Procured by, to
We just,
consultant?
at the last meeting, we just approved that. So I think in the contract we have with them that it has to be done by July of 2020.
So it's a
I
consultant?
assume that that would be the cycle from that
And I
point.
think it was about a 6-month construction, 6-month duration for them to do their due diligence.
And we've been remiss by not saying this, but the Oak Street property is absolutely the #1 priority again. And we're looking with MHP, right? So that actually is a project that's on its way. It's not that we haven't done anything.
Through the chair, do you mean the Sisson Road property?
Sisson Road?
Actually, both are under.
No,
Because I thought you said Oak Street was
I'm
dead.
talking about.
Hold on, one at a time.
We're talking about the old school that's now Cape Cod Theater Company, Sisson Road.
Okay, I'm also, in Mary's, but I just want to make sure I understand one thing. All of you are talking about this money would be procured maybe to buy land. Would it only be to buy land, or would it be, to your point just a minute ago, Chris, if someone comes to us with a project, we want to get in the game with that, and maybe some of this money would be spent towards that project?
There's 3 different potentials in my mind that we would have. So the Oak Street is one in which we would do the pre-development and then basically sell that off, so the value of the land, we wouldn't probably have to do a lot more cash in something like that.
Okay.
Sisson Road, we have where that also has value because the land wouldn't have to be procured. That's free land, if you would, towards the development cost. But if we have 16 units or whatever they come back with in the pre-development, let's say it's 16, we may decide to make it more affordable, that we need to spend $20,000 per unit to drive the cost down to get into the affordability range. So there is a chance that money would be spent in that area of doing development on town-owned land. We could go out tomorrow and say, we have $800,000, is there anybody that wants to partner with us that could deliver 50 units and see if we got any partners? What I'm saying is, we've only had very preliminary discussions with people and, to try to get a sense for what the marketplace is, but you need to understand the marketplace before you go out with that RFP. So there are options for us to move expeditiously.
But I'm with the chair. And that's been, if you've been watching this, that's been a comment I've made consistently, is that we need to show some success by doing a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that, we have chosen that project at the head of Sisson by Brooks Academy as the one that we're on. Because you're going to want to see that. That's David's point is well taken. I would want to see something done. It's not a bank account.
My last question is it all focused towards, low to moderate income projects for people that are working here in the town? That's the ultimate goal, right? So that they can stay and we can keep them in those kind of, as opposed to senior stuff. Is there 2 separate things?
Don't qualify that.
That's what I was going to ask.
I think what we need to say is, by state law,
Just global. There you go.
70% can be local preference, and that has to be open up.
Perfect.
It is another, anyway, your funds cannot be used for small A affordability. It can only be used for large A.
Got it.
My goal ultimately would be to be able to come up with assets that would allow us to branch out so that maybe a 60-40 small A teacher, fireman, police officer component. Landscaper component is in that, as well as capital A affordability.
Yeah.
But because honestly, we need both, and the trust is about the only mechanism that could handle that, because you can't take an application here that's a mixed application.
Right. Great, thank you.
All set, Joe.
Yep.
Mary, do you want to, are you done?
I'm done.
Bob?
I'm done. Mine aimed at you.
See how careful I was
It was
with that.
aimed at him.
Oh, goodness.
I don't have any specific questions other than I do want to comment that I do think the $50,000 for the coordinator is very beneficial. I know I've learned a lot from that service about affordability, attending meetings and stuff, and it is a good education, certainly, venue. So that's my comment.
All set? James?
Yeah, I think everybody involved was looking for results, and I think the Sisson Road project is great. It seems like the right location, and it's not huge. The scale is manageable, and yeah, it'd be great to see, like you say, a beginning and a successful project. Then we all kind of know what we're spending money on, what we're supporting. I can see the need for continuous funding this year. But yeah, I would tend to get a bit more skeptical as the years pass and things don't happen. That's all for me.
John?
So I want to get a little more into the weeds on the 50,000, because it was a little unclear to me in the proposal. I mean, I think I know what it all is, but it wasn't, either I missed it or it wasn't stated explicitly. There's a sentence on the second page, the first sentence that starts on the second page. The additional 20,000 is for specialized work that is beyond the 10 hours. So I believe I remember from previous documents that there was 30 grand for 10 hours a week. Is that correct? It doesn't say that here, so I'm just trying to verify that that's what we're talking
I
about.
pointed out there's an actual arithmetic error in pitching it that way, because we built the total based on hours expended, but everybody forgot that the second year of the contract was 12 months, not 6 months. So at the rate we were spending, we were going to get half of the services. I don't think it's up to the 10 hours.
But that's not what this proposal is about. You're asking for $50,000 starting in fiscal year 21. I mean, yeah, 21. So I'm asking, is that 50 grand, 30,000 of it is for 10 hours a week of contracted upfront services, and there's an extra $20,000 in there for more ad hoc work at $100 an hour? Do I have that correct or not?
That's how I would view it, because, again, you're looking at it as a challenge, but it's got to be addressed somehow. We haven't built anything. We haven't gotten to the point where there's an actual physical project.
Wait, I'm not questioning
No,
the
no.
need for that. I'm trying to
But those are the
understand what
hours that we need to
proposal-
expend. We are just building up to the point right now where we even have a plan.
I get it.
Yeah,
So that's more, my question is, you're talking about, well, the 10 hours a week for 30 grand is like $60 an hour, which in my simple-minded way, that's like paying somebody $120,000 a year for a 40-hour work week. $100 an hour is paying someone 200 grand a year for a 40-hour work week. And I'm just questioning, and it seems from this proposal, my other impression from the proposal is that the 10 hours a week is completely inadequate. I think you're saying the same thing. You've got a lot of work to do, and 10 hours a week is not enough time to cover the work. So my question is, why contract it out that way I mean, I'm sure there's value for the money there and there's expertise there, but I'm questioning why not have a full-time hire for this, particularly at the beginning when you need more than 10 or 15 hours a week.
I not only agree with you, but the extension, or the option that we executed for the second year is the end of that contract. Personally, I wanted to take a look. I can't speak for the trust because we haven't voted on this, but I think we should be looking at the staff support as opposed to off-the-shelf contractor support.
So, and if that were the case, is any of this other money, the other 500,000 and the other 800,000, the other 500,000 in this proposal and 800, I mean, I know you're saying you don't want to squander the funds on endless studies, but on the other hand, you have some need for some hard work at the beginning. I'm just wondering, I'm questioning whether this is the way to slice the bologna here.
Me too. I can't give you the answer because I've been musing over that for the last 6 months, whether that's the most efficacious way of going.
And if we just agree to this proposal as written, I'm not sure it's a question for you or others on the committee, would you have the freedom to make that choice?
Yeah, I think if the money, if it's 550, then we would have to use 500 for housing, and then the 50 would be for the support service. I mean, if that's the way the money is given to us, we'd have to be compliant with how the money was given to us. I do think in terms of, we do have people that have walk-in traffic. We've been trying to make ourselves, the staff support available to the general public, and they're doing education. We did some educational videos at the last meeting. So we are trying to spend some of that money on outreach. I think the reason why we ask for additional money is we also have had different inquiries from different groups that have approached us about talking about what options are available. I think it's probably safe, Mid-Cape Church Homes has invited us to a few of their functions. So, having discussions, and that's something where the additional specific staff support to kind of research out and see what makes sense in terms of additional opportunities, I think is where the additional money was really needed, because we don't have that within the 10 hours that we have in the base contract.
So just final point of clarification for me. So your view is that the 500,000 that's in this proposal, if granted, would be set aside to apply to specific projects, not to do any upfront work. And the 50,000 you would use one way or another to fund staff support.
Yes.
Okay.
Now you're set.
I'm done.
And one other thing, we have the ability to put conditions on it. Kim?
So first, I'm going to say I'm fully in support of this. I agree completely with Mary, especially for something as needed as affordable housing. Having the liquidity available is completely necessary. I understand, David, that you can easily come to ask the committee for money from the CPC, but that takes time. And as we all know, that especially in a municipality, that can take an extended amount of time. And sometimes, either before or during a project, things need to be moved on quickly so you don't lose the project, or adjusted quickly. Having the liquidity to do that is necessary. The housing trust model works in many towns. More and more towns are adopting this. Eastham and Orleans have now started their own affordable housing trust as well. So I just wanted to back up what Mary said, that it is definitely needed. I wasn't here for the last 3 rounds of funding, so I will give you that. But hearing that it's only been in existence for a little over a year, it seems like much has gotten done, and the liquidity does need to be there for the projects to be able to move forward. Also, I do agree with John on the housing coordinator. I was a little concerned. It does look like quite a significant amount of work for 10 hours a week, although the price tag attached to it seems a little bit high. I wonder if some of this pre-work could have been done in-house. I know you mentioned benefits, and that might have been more expensive, but maybe some of this could be done in-house, and then as the projects get fully underway, then I can see that price tag being necessary, but right now I'm not sure, so I kind of agree with John on that as well. So don't have any specific questions, just wanted to say I'm in support of it, and I agree with the need for it.
Kim, you seem to be knowledgeable about this, so let me ask you this. Is there duplication between towns in these processes?
Duplication meaning?
The amount of information that's provided, can it be provided from one town to another town to another town?
Yeah, of course,
So
absolutely.
there could be duplication of process.
I don't.
So if a single entity had 5 or 6 units under them, and they're providing they're providing service for that single entity.
If it was in that town, is that what you're asking?
Right.
So I
And
suppose,
outside that town.
usually the funds are used for in-town. I mean, I know you've got the 70% there, but usually it's used for in-town.
Okay, so that's the funds. What about the information?
Meaning
From
just,
town to town to town?
I would imagine that you could get that.
It's similar.
Yeah, it's very similar. Like they could call up, like somebody mentioned talking to Mary, you talk to Mary. So
Right.
yes, absolutely. You could call Paul Lag in Eastham and talk to him about it as well. So yes, information could be shared.
Paul's already presented to us as well, so.
Done.
Hi, so I want to start with housing is very
I'm sorry.
complicated.
Are you all set?
Oh, yes, yes.
My apologies. Done.
Housing's very complicated, so I think we all have to acknowledge that to start. What I would have liked to seen with this application is maybe some financials. So how much money do you have on hand? How much money have you spent? And also what you plan to spend the money on. So we're talking sort of in general right now, but I think as a trust, it would be a really good exercise for you to say, this much is going to go towards the municipal land we have. This much we're going to use in potential private partnerships. This much we're going to use for pre-development, education. And I also think it's really important that we do not forget that it takes a long time to development. So in the meantime, you really need to have some non-building strategies. You can't just create units, you have to preserve units, and you have to help people today, because in 5 years, a lot of those people aren't going to be here anymore. In that, I would know how much you get annually from the cell tower, and
35,000.
okay, and how much is there now? Like, what's your aggregate right now?
70,000.
70,000. And does that include the allocation you'll get for FY19?
Some commitments, there was a commitment of, what we look at, $13,000 or $10,000 for the pre-development. And then the study that we just, the action plan is $25,000.
So that's all coming out of money? Okay. So again, I would encourage you, and maybe this is something through the chair we could ask for as backup, is some form of accounting, how much money you have, whether it's CPC, whether it's cell tower, and what your current commitments are. That would be really helpful. I also think it would be really helpful if we had some kind of reports from the housing coordinator consultant that you're using about the work that they're doing. Because the problem is we're talking about things in general terms, right? Everybody wants to see what is really happening, and a lot is happening, but we're not seeing it. So I think that would be helpful, again, for the board. I also think it would be helpful for the public when they go to vote on.
We do have it on the webpage, and the monthly reports are posted to the web page. So we have our own section of the webpage.
So could we, through the chair, have financials and at least 2 reports of what the housing consultant has done in the last 6 months?
Make that request.
Okay, great.
Be reasonable.
So the other thing is, just in, going out and thinking about working with private partners, I'm really hopeful that you're going to, at some point soon, do some community input sessions, so that you have some guidance in terms of what the community wants in these potential RFPs. I would say also, you're probably at a point where you should report back to the select board as well for input. You made a couple comments I just wanted to clarify. So the town of Harwich receives CDBG block grant funds, and those monies are used to run rehabilitation programs. And any rehab program that the trust might engage in beyond that can only be used for homes that are already deed restricted. So you cannot use CPC funds to rehab unless the original building was bought with CPC funds. You could use your cell tower funds because they're not CPC restricted. You did also mention the Housing Authority. Their request is for rental voucher only. And when we talk about non-building solutions, rental voucher programs are very important because they're helping people right now on the ground. So I wanted to clarify a couple of the comments that were made. In terms of the difference between big A affordable, little a, and workforce housing, CPC funding allows you to spend up to 100% of the area AMI, the area median income. Right now, if you look at the median incomes, you are talking about workforce housing. You can push up to 120. You can't do it with CPC funds, but really right now in the climate that we're in, 100% is going to hit some of the lower end teachers or firefighters, the starters. The 30 to 60% is really your low and moderate income. So I guess,
Donna,
is there a
excuse me for a
question?
moment.
Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah. How is this relevant to the application?
Well, I would have been happier with more specificity in the application. I think I'm just encouraging them as a trust to really dig a little deeper, get in more details, not just for this committee, but as they go forward with potential more CPC funding, to make sure that they have everything they need, because it is a lot of money, and I do wholly support housing. But you gotta have some backbone to it. You have to tie your goals to your housing production plan. And I think the increase in hours for the housing consultant will help with that. But once they decide what they're gonna do, because their contract is ending, they either have to go back out and they really have to form what that's gonna look like and what they're gonna do with the 50,000, or they have to go in a different direction, so.
Do you have an opening on the trust?
I'm already on a trust. I'm on the Brewster Trust. I don't think being on two trusts is,
But Donna brings up some excellent points. I mean, I've heard them before. We are where we're at. I think that we've kind of piddled away a year where we could have had the plan sooner so that we could do that, but I can't make up either applicants that we don't have in front of us. There has been no formal ask from anybody. I know they exist, but I pulled us back from that. Is that we wanted to set priorities against them, but priorities against what? So we didn't have the plan, but we're where we're at. And to be able to answer some of the questions that you have with some relevant answers, there really needs to be a blueprint about how we're operating. We've been doing everything ad hoc for a year.
and you also.
That troubles me.
Well, I think that's part of the action plan.
That is
to
the
get
action plan.
The action plan is to bring form and function.
But that's 2020, right? That's gonna be done?
In 2020.
And Mr. Chair, don't be too troubled. The point is that we've taken action to identify properties with in-house staff. We've gone to town meeting, we voted on them, we vetted what could be built within the upland areas of the properties. One of the reasons we're going in for the engineer for Oak Street. I'm personally not satisfied that just on a hope and a prayer that we're only gonna be able to build one unit without getting some solid engineering that shows me, yeah, that's all we can do. I'm not gonna bail on a property, because once you build on it, it's done. But everything that Donna said is actually true, and that really needs to be what we're kind of concerning ourselves with over the next 2 or 3 months.
So I'm just going to end with how I started. Housing is really complicated. I think probably the most thing for you right now is you need to create regulations, because you can't give money to anyone right now because you don't have guidelines by which you allocate money. So that is and should be your highest priority. And I think if you make that and you commit to that priority, that will make everybody, not just on the CPC, but residents as well, more comfortable with giving large sums of money. So,
I hear you.
thank you.
All set? Yes, you are?
I'm
Mary?
gonna cheat, so I'm gonna go on the other side so I can hit you too.
I'm good for now.
You're all set?
I am.
Anybody else? Any other questions from the board? Okay,
That was the shoe
thank
drop.
you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for your
That was my
consideration.
laptop.
Just gonna get his name.
You forgive me for not liaising, but I'm going home.
What?
Oh, somebody's got to. Thanks, guys.
Next, the Lower Cape Housing Institute.
Yeah,
Welcome, folks.
thank you. Way past my dinner time. All right.
My bedtime.
Trust me, you're not alone.
And everywhere
In
she goes,
either
there's
case.
snacks.
Right?
Should have brought the candy upstairs.
You've got the floor.
So the agenda, well, so my name is Andrea Aldana. I'm the Director of Housing Advocacy at the Community Development Partnership, which is a nonprofit community development corporation helping people live, work, and thrive in the 8 towns of the Lower Cape, including Harwich. And I am here with
Ann Robinson, Chief Program Officer for the CDP.
and I saw on the agenda that we have a 5-minute presentation slot. So I'll keep this very brief because all of the information is in the application. So just suffice to say that we're coming back for a 3rd and 4th year request to support the Lower Cape Housing Institute. We are asking for the same level of funding as we asked for last year. The difference is that we have a multi-year request because for smaller sums of money, coming to meetings like this sometimes eats into that request really quickly, and we just thought it would be a much more efficient use of everybody's time and resources if we put in a 2-year request. The activity is largely the same. We are here to provide training and technical assistance to municipalities in our service area to advance housing production in the region. We do this through the Lower Cape Housing Institute, which to date has been a 6-week training. We actually are ending it tomorrow. Every year, we solicit feedback from attendees and boards and committees in all of the municipalities that are engaged in housing development or any decision-making around housing to inform the curriculum and make sure that we're offering sessions that are relevant and useful. So this year, for example, we follow the development timeline because we find ourselves for the first time having all towns either directly engage in development or at least have identified a site toward development, and so this has never happened before. Includes quarterly peer group meetings that we hold in the Lower and Outer Cape, and we move them around the sub-region. I believe the next one is in
November
Harwich.
12th in Harwich.
Thank you. And so those peer group meetings are informal spaces where folks like yourself can share best practices, do some venting, find some common solutions, and build trust with each other and network to encourage regional collaboration. Those conversations have been really fruitful and fascinating, frankly, and they've been happening for 2 years now. The other piece of the Housing Institute program is our advanced trainings. So the Institute is meant to be an introductory level of information, given that housing is incredibly complicated. But when we want to do a deeper dive into topics that are of interest to our audience, which is yourself, for example, we are very open and flexible to offering those topics as advanced sessions. So a perfect example is at last year's Housing Institute, there was a lot of energy and interest in Harwich specifically around form-based code because we had someone come in and speak about that. And so this year we are offering form-based code as an advanced training on December 12th, actually, and that is because Harwich asked for it, which is why we're holding it in Harwich. So that's just an example of how we can be really responsive to the needs of towns in our region. Those are the main pieces of the Lower Cape Housing Institute. I guess I just wanted to say, to kind of piggyback on the previous conversation, we do track success. We do have a strong evaluation process. So our outcomes are, we want to see zoning changes that advance housing production in the region. We'd like to see towns increase the number of units on their subsidized housing inventory. We like to see towns increase their utilization of CPA for housing. And we also want to see broad public support for housing. So in Harwich, you've already seen some changes. Last town meeting, you adopted a modified, an updated accessory dwelling unit bylaw. You are working on 2 parcels for housing development within 1 year. That's amazing. You funded a housing coordinator. We're happy it's us, but frankly, just the fact that you have one is an incredibly important decision. And the action plan that the trust is working on is going to include a strong community engagement component both within the town and outside of the town, which is a really important piece of public support to make sure that all of the time and energy and resources that you're putting into Oak Street and Sisson Road are done in a really public way that builds trust with the community and makes sure that you're meeting the needs of your own residents. So I do see progress, and I think that the Housing Institute has been a big piece of why there has been so much progress in the region over the past couple of years.
Anything else?
Do you want to hear more?
Questions from the board? Kim?
I don't have a lot of questions. I guess my biggest question would be, what type of turnout do you usually see in these 6-week sessions and the quarterly ones? Do you get a lot of community involvement, a lot of towns coming to these?
So our target audience for the housing and its related programming is specifically elected and appointed municipal officials and town staff. So we are not engaging the public. We work with the public through other pieces of our overall program, which is our Cape Housing advocacy training. Our goal is to educate 5 people per year. Different towns have different levels of engagement. Some do better than others. We have exceeded that goal in every town every year, but if you're curious, we've educated at least 17 people in Harwich alone.
That was my question. I'm just about to have a so I'm good.
All set?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Robert?
Just a question about an ask for 2 years. That doesn't seem, is that possible with CPC money? Because we're only doing 1 year.
We generally have done it. I don't know the answer to that question. I will find out.
Actually, it is possible. I had checked into that. What you would be doing is approving the full amount of 15,000,
Right.
but it would be expended 7,500 in 1 year and 75 in the next. And the only reason we did that is, as Andreas said, it's a small amount of money, and frankly, we keep turning in pretty much the same application each year. Those of you who have heard this presentation could probably give it as well as we can. So nothing's going to change a tremendous amount in the next couple of years, and so that's why we just thought it would be more efficient if we did it that way.
Again, check into that, and I will talk to Carol about that. And because this is going to all now fold into the grant agreements, so I don't know if that helps you.
Okay. The other question, is there any limit to the number of people from Harwich participating if it turns out?
No, I'd like to see 10 times the number.
Okay, but that doesn't affect the pricing or anything?
No.
This is, every town gets the same amount or asks the same amount?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good, that's it.
James?
I don't have any questions.
Joe?
I don't have any questions. I'm just in full support of it. I've attended several things of Andrea's, the 6-week one and then several quarterlies. And housing is very, very complicated. I can't go to enough of these things. And there's no college you get it from, and the university is right here. I would give them more if I could, so just my 2 cents.
John?
My question was Bob's question, so that's all. I
Don?
support it.
Do you have a plan beyond the 5 years? Or is it kind of, if you keep having interest, you're going to keep going?
As far as the format of education or just the goals of the program?
Do you envision the Cape Housing Institute going beyond 5 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. That doesn't necessarily mean that we'll always do a 6-week institute if that's not what the region needs.
Okay, so you might adapt to that.
Yeah, in fact, something I forgot to mention is that this next year, what I'd really, really like to do is come see you more often and get more input from you and all of the committees that we serve, to find out what we should be offering. You know, I think you should think of us as your de facto training arm, and we can really design and create whatever is important to you and necessary. And we'd like to work more closely with all the towns to make sure we're doing that.
Would you do something like that on a quarterly basis?
I think we should talk about it, absolutely.
I'm sorry, Don.
No, this is exactly the type of conversation that should come out of it. And when Andrea was talking about the Lower Cape peer group meeting, CPC members should feel like they could come to that because you're providing funding, so you're part of the conversation. And I think it would actually be really helpful for some people who have never been to go and see sort of what the towns are communicating about, and some of the crossover you were talking about earlier. There are some efficiencies when we get in the same room and we talk about them. The other question that I had is, how do you sustain interest, right? As you keep going, how do you get people to keep coming? And I know last year you measured outcomes in terms of what happened at town meeting. And I think you just mentioned counting units is a good way, zoning changes. I'd like to see a component that talks about people we've actually helped. How many people have we actually helped? Because I want to keep coming back to the same place. We're here to get people into homes, to help them stay in their homes. And there's a very human component to housing that I think we cannot lose in all of this discussion. So, you know, how do you sustain interest in the ongoing education piece and collaboration piece?
Is that a question?
It is a question.
Oh.
I think it's the same approach that a town should be having with its own residents, and that is just having a community-engaged approach to anything that we design. So we have design committees for the Housing Institute, for our advocacy training. I think the more that you can get participants involved in designing the process and making sure that it's serving you, then obviously you'll be more interested. And so that's a little bit of a culture shift that I'd like to adopt in partnership with all of you moving forward.
Joe, Donna, you.
Yeah, I just want to say again, the Lower Cape peer meeting is November 12th. It's at the Harwich Community Center. It's at
3 o'clock.
Oh, I thought it was 2 o'clock.
Always 3 to 5.
3 to 5, okay.
We always have food.
What date? I'm sorry.
November 12th.
Thank you.
And maybe
Sorry.
that could be sent to this committee, or?
Now that the secretary has that
already.
information, I'll have her disperse that blast to the entire group.
Great. We also have a monthly.
Please don't respond.
Me don't respond?
No,
Oh, okay.
the board.
That reminds me, we have a monthly Cape Housing Institute newsletter, and that's really the best way to find out about all our offerings. Flyers get lost sometimes, but that's the most direct way.
Is that a PDF on your web? Your newsletter?
No, there isn't, but I could send you.
Is it on
an
your web?
archive.
I'm just thinking, if I'm sending an
Yeah,
announcement, I'll
yeah, that's
include
fine.
the newsletter. How do I get the newsletter? I mean, is it a PDF?
Don?
They don't anyway.
quick
I asked
question.
for-
Yes.
I don't count myself.
I understand academia and where you're headed. For me, it's a little bit different. Is there a possibility of bringing anyone into a board like this to explain what their process was going through what you've educated them in or what they may need in the future?
I need an example, but I can't see why not. That seems pretty straightforward. Is there something
I
particular
would like
you
to
want
see,
to learn?
I'd like to see that happen.
About what?
Have some live individuals come in, other than yourself and what's sitting on this board, to explain what they've learned, how they've learned it, and how they apply it.
Oh, someone who's gone through the Institute, for
Yes.
example. Oh, gotcha. Oh, yeah, of course. That's easy.
I'm done. Any other questions from the board?
I don't have a
Mary?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. I had gone to the selectmen's meeting about a month ago when you had presented to the selectmen kind of your accomplishments over the last year and how you had measured successes. And I would just, I don't remember what week it was, but I would encourage everybody to spin back, go onto YouTube and look at that section of the selectmen's meeting. Andrea gave an excellent presentation. It really hit all of the touchstones. And then I believe CDP gave another one last week, too,
I
as
don't
well.
even remember that presentation.
It's a blur.
There's so many. I talk a lot these days, but
I want to say it was about a
appreciate
month ago, about a month or 6 weeks ago. So it was a good touchstone as to what different towns and who had adopted, how many ADUs bylaws had been adopted, and how
that.
they
Oh, yeah,
had,
every
how
year
you
we
had
do
measured.
an analysis of town meeting in
Exactly.
all 8 towns around housing, so.
So that was just, I think, something that would be good for the general public and also board members to see what the Institute is helping to accomplish.
I'm dating myself. Carly Simon used to say, drink tea, warm tea. Anyway, any other questions from the board? None? Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
presentation. Okay, now,
Now, I want to ask you a quick question.
Yes.
I have told everybody that they have a 5-minute thing. So if you're not going to,
we're going to continue that from
Well-
this point out.
okay. 'Cause, I mean,
I understand.
I sound like an idiot.
No, you're doing what I asked you to do. That's
Okay.
fine.
I mean, I'm perfectly fine.
I got
mean,
it.
Do you want me to
Nope,
not be a nag?
no,
Because I do repeat it a few times.
no, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Okay, we're on the old business. I have 2 lease agreements here that this board needs to sign. And this is one's for Habitat for Humanity, and the other one is for the Cape Housing Institute. So,
They're not
again,
lease
we're,
agreements.
what, I'm sorry,
They're
grant
not-
agreements, I'm
okay.
sorry, did I say
You
lease?
said
You
lease.
did.
I'm
I
hung,
wrote
I'm
lease,
hung
and
up
I knew
on
what you
leases
meant.
tonight, I guess. They're grant agreements. So, I'd like to pass it down, I've already signed it. Would you folks put your Hancocks on it, please?
Just-
Now, this has been
Just
vetted
any-
through the
any-
town, through Carol, through the attorneys. It goes from our table to the Board of Selectmen, and they're gonna vet it again.
I think it's on the last page.
How many copies do we have, David? 1, 2?
There's just one for each.
So 2 copies each?
What was that?
I said that should be fun.
Well,
But these are going to the select.
these are going to the Selectmen.
So I'm ready?
I'll deliver these.
So is it just one?
Just one.
Yes. And for some reason, the Selectmen like to be the last signatures.
That's
That way.
Thank you.
And you did see the email where the lower Cape, they obviously gave it to us though. The lower Cape, Chris couldn't figure out if she had given us the grant agreement back. But we already had it?
We already had it.
I mean, you saw that
That's
email that
yeah,
she
that's
sent.
Habitat.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other one is
Oh, it
low.
was Chris. I'm so
Right.
sorry. It was Habitat. I
Right.
apologize, yes.
Right. Go ahead, Dawn.
I'm sorry, so just first page doesn't have a date on it? so
Right,
it's-
and there's a note on one of those where we sign, they send it to legal, then it gets dated.
Okay, so it gets dated at the end?
Generally speaking, yes. You would date it on the last date of the last signature.
Okay, and then are they also gonna fill in under section 1, contract documents? The contract documents consist of this grant agreement, the CPA application approved by the committee dated, and then that's blank as well.
Yeah, they'll take care of that. That'll be Carol.
Okay. In Carol I trust.
And the one question I forgot to ask tonight, one of the most important questions is, where's the trust agreements? Because they have 2 of them.
2 years worth.
And that slipped right by. I dropped the ball on that one. But I will make that inquiry. And again, for the rest of the board, these are standard agreements, I keep wanting to say lease. They're standard grant agreements. And they're, how was that put? They're favorable grant agreements? What is that?
It's hard for me to say. Well, you said friendly agreement.
Friendly
last month.
agreement, that's what it is.
I mean, that's what you said last month.
Right. If that's to ease any of the emotion that,
David, I think that second one didn't make it this way yet.
okay? Wow, I think it's that
Trying to
one.
actually read the signatures.
That's what, oh, it's this one, sorry. That's what I was trying to do. Okay. Thank you all for that. On the next agenda, we have the,
Well, I sent everybody that mock-up of the next agenda, and
there was one Donna couldn't attend.
no.
That wasn't
Are you talking January, February?
January, yeah.
She did an
Oh, okay,
additional
all
date.
right, all right.
And two people need to check some things, so we do not have the January, February dates set. We will.
Okay,
And I'll,
thank you.
oh, I'm so sorry, I think I penned you
What do
there.
you got me?
I will forward it to everybody when I get two more people back, and that will be,
Set
what
in
we'll, no, because it's January and February, we have
Set
which
in
will
stone.
follow every.
We won't worry about that.
The other thing is, the next agenda, the next three agendas have already been drafted, and I was waiting, if y'all didn't know this, even though I send this out and I say, y'all have to come, or somebody, I sort of do it in dosage, so each month, each meeting, I sent a batch, and then another batch when I heard back, and I worked on December 3rd today, because I just heard about one person that could have dominoed. So I'm just hearing back from them. So basically, I haven't heard from two people at this point, and everybody else is a lock. So the drafts that I gave you are official.
Any questions?
Which,
The agendas for the next few meetings. You've got you have, the next meeting is the 14th, Thursday, followed by another Thursday, the 21st, followed by a Tuesday, December 3rd. Those are the presentation meetings, and then the 12th of December is follow-ups. Or possible voting, depending on how everything works, but we
Yeah,
have a lot to discuss.
I requested at that point follow-ups and possible vote. So there may be an opportunity that we can take some of the smaller units and act on them, so.
And then in January, we'll really have to get that vote down, because in February, we're at warrants.
Right.
Warrant articles.
Okay, is everybody clear before we get out of here? Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, one thing, so I got an email that the CPC does their annual report to the Board of Selectmen on the 18th.
18th.
I have Brewster Town meeting, so I won't be there, but what is your general, is it usually the whole committee, just the chair?
It's funny, we have new members, you're right, I'm sorry. It's generally myself giving a presentation to the board. You're welcome to come if you choose. So it's not a hard-nailed obligation, so.
It's not a joint meeting.
No, I got
So
it,
I'm in.
wasn't it, I don't like demerits. I'm a type A personality.
I love it.
Really?
Oh,
That's
we
a
have
good
people
way
that
to
have
put it. I
dealt with
like
each other
that.
before in this room. Isn't that interesting?
Have you not met him?
Anyway, are there anybody want anything on the agenda? We're set?
Anything new?
Anything new for the agenda? We're
And I
done.
won't post them until
I need a motion, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Before I fall over. A motion's been made, all those in favor? Is a second, a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, folks, for being patient.